A house of cards, the fragile facade of American prosperity. The American economy, once a symbol of unrivaled strength and prosperity, now teeters precariously on the edge of a precipice. For decades, it has been the envy of the world, a beacon of innovation, opportunity and growth. Yet, beneath this glittering surface, cracks have begun to appear, revealing a much more fragile reality. Beneath the veneer of a booming stock market and low unemployment lies a deeply troubling reality, a toxic cocktail of soaring debt, rampant inflation and a financial system teetering on the brink of collapse. The stock market may be hitting record highs, but this masks the underlying instability that threatens to unravel the entire economic fabric. This is not mere hyperbole. The warning signs are flashing red, signaling a looming crisis that threatens to plunge the nation into a prolonged period of economic turmoil. The indicators are clear. From the housing market to consumer confidence, every metric points towards an impending disaster. The seeds of this crisis were sown long ago, fertilized by years of reckless financial deregulation, unsustainable levels of borrowing, and a widening gap between the haves and have-nots. Deregulation allowed financial institutions to take on excessive risks, while unsustainable borrowing by both the government and consumers has created a debt bubble of unprecedented proportions. The COVID-19 pandemic, with its unprecedented economic disruptions, only exacerbated these underlying vulnerabilities, exposing the fragility of a system built on shaky foundations. The pandemic acted as a stress test, revealing just how unprepared the economy was for a major shock. Today, millions of Americans are struggling to make ends meet, crushed under the weight of mounting debt, stagnant wages and rising costs for essential goods and services. The cost of living continues to rise while wages have remained largely stagnant, creating a squeeze on the middle and lower classes. The American dream, once a beacon of hope and opportunity, is fading for many, replaced by a growing sense of anxiety and despair. The promise of upward mobility and a better future seems increasingly out of reach for a large segment of the population. This essay will delve into the heart of this looming crisis, examining the key factors driving America's economic descent and exploring the potential consequences for individuals, families, and the nation as a whole. We will look at how these economic challenges are affecting everyday lives and what it means for the future of the country. It is a story of warning, but also a call to action, a plea for policymakers and citizens alike to confront the challenges ahead and chart a more sustainable and equitable path forward. The time for complacency is over. The stakes are too high to ignore. We must act now to secure a better future for all. Drowning in debt, the crushing weight of credit card spending. The modern American dream is increasingly being financed by credit cards, but this dream is turning into a nightmare for many. One of the most alarming indicators of America's economic malaise is the staggering rise in credit card debt. Since 2019, credit card balances have ballooned to unprecedented levels, fueled by a combination of stagnant wages, rising inflation, and a culture of easy credit. This surge in debt is not just a number on a chart, it represents the financial struggles of millions of Americans. Americans are increasingly relying on credit cards to cover basic living expenses, from groceries and gasoline to rent and healthcare. This reliance on credit cards creates a vicious cycle of debt. Each swipe of the card may provide temporary relief, but it also adds to the growing mountain of debt that becomes harder to climb out of with each passing month. As balances grow, so too do the minimum payments required, further straining household budgets and leaving less money available for savings, investments, or even essential needs. The stress of managing these payments can take a toll on mental health, leading to anxiety and depression. The average American household now carries over $8,000 in credit card debt, with interest rates often exceeding 20%. This debt burden acts as a significant drag on economic growth, as consumers are forced to divert more of their income towards servicing their debts, leaving less money available for discretionary spending. Families find themselves cutting back on leisure activities, vacations, and even necessary medical treatments. The consequences of this debt binge are already being felt across the country. Delinquency rates on credit card payments are rising, and personal bankruptcies are on the upswing. The financial strain is pushing many to the brink, with some resorting to payday loans and other high-interest borrowing options that only exacerbate the problem. The situation is particularly dire for low and middle-income households who are disproportionately impacted by rising interest rates and stagnant wages. For many, the dream of home ownership, a college education, or even a secure retirement is slipping further out of reach as they struggle to keep their heads above water in a sea of debt. The emotional toll on families can be devastating, leading to strained relationships and a sense of hopelessness. The proliferation of credit card debt is not merely a personal financial crisis, it is a systemic threat to the entire US economy. As consumers become increasingly burdened by debt, their ability to participate in the economy as consumers and drivers of growth is severely compromised. This widespread financial strain can lead to reduced consumer confidence and spending, which are critical components of economic health. This in turn can trigger a downward spiral of reduced spending, job losses, and further economic contraction. The ripple effects of high credit card debt can be felt across various sectors, from retail to real estate, creating a cycle that is difficult to break. Addressing this issue requires a multifaceted approach, including financial education, policy changes, and support systems to help individuals manage and reduce their debt. Repossessions on the rise, losing ground in the American dream. The American dream, often symbolized by home ownership, is facing a stark reality check as repossession rates climb across the country. This troubling trend is not just a statistic. It represents the unraveling of a dream that has been central to the American ethos for generations. The very foundation of stability and wealth building for millions is crumbling under the weight of a perfect storm, soaring housing costs, stagnant wages, and the lingering economic fallout from the pandemic. These factors have created an environment where even those who once felt secure are now on shaky ground. For many Americans, owning a home represents not just a place to live, but a tangible investment in their future. It's a source of pride, security, and a pathway to building generational wealth. Home ownership has long been seen as a cornerstone of the American dream, a dream that promises stability and prosperity. However, this dream is rapidly becoming unattainable for a growing segment of the population. The surge in repossessions is a clear indication of the financial stress gripping American families. The rising cost of living, coupled with stagnant wages, has made it increasingly difficult for many to keep up with mortgage payments. It's a stark reminder that behind the facade of economic recovery, many are struggling to keep a roof over their heads. The reality is that the economic gains touted in headlines often do not reflect the lived experiences of countless individuals and families. The human cost of this crisis is immeasurable. As families are uprooted, communities are destabilized, and the cycle of poverty is perpetuated. When families lose their homes, they lose more than just a physical structure. They lose their sense of security and belonging. This crisis is not limited to any specific geographic region or demographic group. From bustling cities to quiet suburbs, the story remains the same. Families are being priced out of their homes, forced to make impossible choices between putting food on the table and keeping a roof over their heads. The ripple effects of these choices extend far beyond individual households, impacting entire communities. The American dream, once a promise of opportunity and upward mobility, is increasingly becoming a distant memory for many. As the gap between the wealthy and the rest of the population widens, the dream of home ownership and financial stability slips further out of reach. The question remains, what can be done to restore this dream for future generations?